don't think there's a policy separation that they've created with Biden. Obviously, she gave a kind of personal defense of him.
It wasn't I don't think she moved the ball that much forward.
Now, you might not like the way she answered him, but she answered him as a capable, qualified leader. And I do think she moved the ball forward a little bit. You know, maybe she didn't score a touchdown tonight.
She is making it clear that she will embrace and be a continuation of Biden's economic policy, his record, what they've done. She offered no remorse, no regrets, no introspection about anything they've done.
So that was the analysis after the first sit-down interview here. Vice President Harris receiving mixed reviews, which you saw there of her first sit-down interview since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee. And the anchor conducting the interview, CNN's Dana Bash, is receiving criticism for not asking enough follow-up questions.
Comes after Harris has faced an onslaught of criticism for not having more interactions with the news media. After all, it's been more than a month since she was announced as the Democratic pick. Tim Graham is the executive editor at NewsBusters. Curtis Houck is the managing editor at NewsBusters, and they join us now. Okay, so Tim, before we get to even the vice president's responses, what did you make of the CNN host, Dana Bash, who did the questioning?
Not very good. We made a list, Alex Christie made a list for us yesterday of like 30 questions that we'd like to see them asked. I think they did 4. And yes, the lack of follow-ups was appalling. And so I would ask people to contrast what we saw with Dana Bash last night to Caitlin Collins' town hall with Trump on CNN, where he didn't get through a sentence, you know, and so obviously there's a dramatic difference depending on which party you're interviewing. And so, you know, it was not a disaster for Kamala in part because she just allowed her to talk for 90 seconds.
Yeah, if we can, control room, jump to question 3, that is BB03, Perry, if we can do that. Talking about the anchor conducting the interview, kind of what you were pointing to, Dana Bash, the line of questioning, not asking enough follow-ups. The Associated Press writing, quote, Bash occasionally had pressed Harris when the vice president failed to answer a question directly. She asked 4 times, for example, about what led Harris to change her position on fracking, a controversial way to extract natural gas from the landscape, from her brief presidential candidacy in 2020. So I'll go back to you, Curtis, on this. Is it fair to say that there wasn't enough pushback on Harris?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Sean. Yeah, I mean, she did talk about fracking. She did bring up, you know, the Green New Deal. She asked Tim Walz about his gun comments, asked about IVF, asked about his 2006 congressional campaigns, what they were saying about his DUI arrest in the 90s. But again, there really weren't follow-ups. Yes, she was constrained by time, but, you know, when you're the interviewer, the media gets so pious about how important they are. So I think if she's driving the bus, she's the one who's going to need to interject and ask those follow-ups. You cannot allow them to go on for 2-3 minutes. You know, we saw this so often with Barack Obama's interviews. They would ask these questions and we'd go on these long, winding college professor lectures. And then sure enough, you know, the interview would be over and only like 4 or 5 questions were asked. That's the issue that you saw with Dana Bash. And that's really what we see often with CNN. Jake Tapper does this as well. You ask a decent B-ish question, and then there's no follow-up when they just kind of dither around because they know that the media coverage, and I saw it this morning already on the broadcast networks, is they said it was fantastic. She was pressed. She was forced. I don't really think she's forced when you only get 1 question and then no follow-ups.
Right. And also the topics chosen, right? That's pretty telling about the priorities of the network that's hosting the interview subject or even the anchor's own bias or priorities. We talk all the time with our viewers. I collect their concerns. They write into me. Immigration and the economy, consistently the top ones, Tim. And I'm just wondering, if you thought that there was, a missed opportunity, even when it comes to the immigration crisis that this country is facing, an opportunity that was missed to follow up on that.
Yes, they know those are the top 2 issues. Yeah. And really the worst question that was just the weakest was to say, you ran around telling us that Joe Biden was just great mentally, and then he wasn't. And he's like, do you have any regrets? She's like, I have no regrets. And that's it. This was a massive years-long deception that she was right there, right next to him. And there was no press back on that. I thought that was really the worst example of no fact check in real time.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up one of the moments there that I wanted to give Dana Bash credit for. She talked about voters right now. She said voters, because one of the slogans for the Harris campaign, I believe, is "We're not going back," right? Something that's obvious, that's chanted oftentimes. And she brought that up. She said, you say we're not going back, but she says voters do want to go back where groceries and housing was affordable. And she even went further to say under President Trump. How do you answer that? And the vice president went on to talk about where inflation is now. She recognizes prices are too high. She talked about, again, price gouging. She talked about the child tax credit multiple times, and then again touted the tax credit on first-time home buyers. But then left it at that. Was that a substantive answer to, again, what Emma was pointing out? Everyday Americans, their main concern is high prices right now, not being able to afford everyday items.
Yeah, you're exact, Sean. You bring up that was probably on the flip side. Tim brought up where it was probably the weakest of Dana Bash. That was probably her stronger exchange because she did ask a follow up in that part because she dithered on and talked about the child tax credit, talked about prescription drugs, but then she said, "Would you say that Bidenomics is working?" Which is a very short but exactly the right kind of question. The very kind of short questions you see Peter Ducey of Fox and your own James Rosen ask in the briefings that are so effective because they're short, but they're biting and they let the subject talk. And that's exactly what happened with Kamala Harris because she gave a very revealing answer, talking in circles, again, citing the same sorts of things that her and Joe Biden did, talk about prescription drugs. But then she just said, she's proud of the work, but there's more work to do. Yeah. I think that's worth keeping an eye on going forward to see if she sticks to that.
Well, you hope more reporters in Washington would take inspiration from what are successful questions because, you want to get these answers. CNN brought out their fact checker, Daniel Dale, who makes appearances often criticizing Republicans. He verified the vice president's explanation on flip-flopping on energy policy. Here's that.
The fact check bottom line, Abby, is that she did not actually make clear at a 2020 debate that she had changed her previous support for a fracking ban. So she ended her 2020 presidential run in December 2019. The only debate she participated in 2020 was the general election debate with then Vice President Mike Pence. And I went over the transcript of that debate tonight. Nowhere in there does she make clear that she had abandoned her previous support for a fracking ban. Rather, she repeated that Joe Biden, the head of the Democratic ticket at the time, would himself not ban fracking.
Okay, so Tim, we got one fact check there. What does that tell you about this network and that fact checker?
Well, if I didn't want to wreck the camera, I'd take a big swig of coffee and do a spit take, because just bringing on Daniel Dale after Kamala Harris talks is shocking. 98% of the time he's coming on to slag Trump, and in this case, what you showed right there was a perfectly accurate and adequate fact check, explaining precisely what she was trying to do there. I don't know why, they can't do it for both sides. But Daniel Dale, if you go to CNN.com, it's 95% hitting the Republicans.
Yeah. Again, I found it interesting flipping through channels right after the interview to see where everyone went. MSNBC kind of just moved on from it, which I found interesting in that moment. All right, Tim Graham, Curtis Houck joining us on that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.